Old trucks rolling, steel boots stomping, engines humming like a prayer in the morning. Dust clouds rising on a cold sunrise, headlamps cutting through Nevada skies. Coffee in the cab, got a long day coming, clock in, crank up, keep them drills humming. Brothers and sisters in the same old fight, chasing that bonus under halogen light. We ain't looking for fame or glory, we're the backbone telling our story. Boots on gravel, hearts in line, sweat and soul and overtime. We're the boss inside the industry, mighty minds where the real ones speak.
Hello, miners. Hello, podcast listeners. Welcome into Mining Minds. Welcome into the Safe Word segment. Hanging out today with my man, Jim Hoover.
Hey, how's it going, Derek?
I love it. We'll get this down sooner or later. But excited to be here with you guys today. Had a lot of good feedback on our first Safe Word segment, and I think we're going to roll into the next one. We've got some people that threw some comments out at us. Probably one of the funnest things for me is to sit down and chop it up with you before the podcast. We just talk about old war stories and things that have happened. So maybe some of that will come out in this segment again, but we'll get into it.
Yeah, we got a lot of those.
Yeah, I do got to thank the audience out there. We had a couple people brass in, throw us some ideas, tell us, hey man, would you talk about this? Would you bring this one up on the podcast? And the first one I'm going to throw at you, Jim, and it seems like we always talk about it. We've talked about it on multiple podcasts, is the safety glasses issue. When should you wear them? Should be a company policy, X, Y, and Z. So first and foremost, Jim has a general idea of what we're talking about going into this, but I would say diving into anything is not been well thought out, I guess. So we're going off the cuff.
When you told me about a couple of the things you wanted to talk about, I did not write them down. So, I mean, I don't want this to be scripted like me reading out of the 30 CFR or company policies from here or there or whatever. So
I'm with you there too. And I think I did write down a couple of the standards that it falls under just for reference for the audience.
Sure.
But outside of that, really kind of just going off the cuff. So with that being said, we do want to have conversation around safety glasses. So what was brought to me or was asked is, a really good conversation and one that I've fought back and forth personally as a safety professional in my career is when is safety glasses mandatory? When is it a big deal? When should you be the safety cop for those safety glasses, right? And so I'm going to throw it to you right away and go, what's your personal thought on there versus what maybe MSHA states or what the company states? What are your thoughts on safety glasses in the workforce? Well,
first of all, anytime that there's a hazard, something can get in your eye, fly rock, anything you're working with, whether it's wood or metal or anything like that, you should wear safety glasses. Okay, that's common sense. I think a lot of companies go with a blanket policy on safety glasses because they kind of have to. The managers that are sitting somewhere in their admin offices, they can't be everywhere all the time saying, hey, mister, get your glasses on. I know when I'm walking around, doing just a walk around on the site, and I see somebody without safety glasses, I'll whistle and do the 2-finger point at my eyes and say, get those on. And they're like, okay, yeah, no problem. I don't think it needs to go really beyond that, at least with the crew that I work with now. But again, getting back to blanket policies, the company has a liability requirement. They have to look out for, themselves. The insurance company has to pay this out. If somebody gets an eye injury, then their premiums go up and all this kind of stuff. So the best thing that they can do is just say, wear your safety glasses.
Yeah.
So we have a couple no PPE zones around the mine site so people can change and get to their transportation home and stuff, after work where you don't have to. So my, rule of thumb is if you're working, even in a PPE-free zone, you better have your PPE on.
Sure.
So
I'm going to maybe challenge and go a different direction because I think the PPE argument, in my opinion, can go a couple different ways. It's a compliant versus safe. So a lot of people will blanket, I guess, policy everything to go, let's just do this so we don't have to have the conversation of what's safe versus what's not. So from my perspective, I always looked at it from a hazard. There's hazards everywhere, but and a lot of people might disagree with this, and that's okay, because I felt like if we're covering the bigger shit, I'll work my way back to the safety glasses. But that's not the I guess, sword I want to die on, at least initially, if there wasn't a hazard present. I mean, somebody's welding, cutting, obviously you're going to have eye protection. If you're in a crappy heading, I should say, and there's dust and rocks flying everywhere, you got to have your safety glasses on. And I've seen and I've heard and I know the stories of riding in a cab and the glass breaking and so there's arguments to be made everywhere. I guess where I come into it and where I struggled with it is a lot of times, I'll give you a good example. We're going down the shaft and somebody's cleaning their glasses, or somebody has their glasses on the top of their head and blowing their nose or whatever. And I have a supervisor who goes, well, he doesn't have his safety glasses on. Are you going to say something? And I would push back a lot of times, because I'd go, first of all, we're in a shaft right now. I mean, the likelihood of anything happening is slim to none. Secondly, I'm not going to go down and try to piss somebody off just to piss somebody off to say that they're compliant. The dude's going to throw on his safety glasses or whatever else. Yeah. So I say that because I do think it's oftentimes a small thing. And if you're not getting the small things right, you're not getting the big things right. So I absolutely agree with that. But I also look at it from the perspective of, we need to be realistic at times. If somebody's down there sweating their ass off and they're nipping and they take their safety glasses off to wipe their eyes or whatever else, forget
to see what you're doing.
Forget to put them on. It's not an opportunity to go down and beat their ass chew their ass rather. To me, maybe we talk about scaling. Maybe we talk about ventilation. Maybe there's 30 other things that we should be having a conversation around. And I'm less concerned if it's a stagnant, I guess, heading that we're in or location that we're in, and we're having a conversation and his safety glasses are on versus the other shit that's going on around me. So this is where that conversation becomes interesting for me. And I think the easy button is to have that blanketed conversation, but it's also the easy button to go and beat somebody up over. And that's where I guess my rub always would come in.
Yeah. So compliant versus safe, we've had this discussion before. Right?
Sure.
So, and I've used it with MSHA inspectors before, that he says, well, he doesn't have his safety glasses on. Okay, but he's compliant.
Sure.
And all the conditions you've listed in the 30 CFR, that's not where we're at. That's not what's going on. And so, in my opinion, he's compliant. Well, what's your safety policy say? And it's like, none of your business.
Right.
Because they can't enforce company policy, right? So they can use it to increase negligence or whatever. If say he was grinding and wasn't wearing safety glasses and our policy says you will, then he can raise the negligence. But if he's walking across the street to throw a bag of trash in the dumpster and he's not wearing his safety glasses, he's still compliant.
Yeah.
Because none of the conditions in the 30 CFR dictate that he has to in this situation. So as far as windshields breaking, it's like you said it yourself, the chances of that happening are slim to none.
Yeah.
So he's not gonna, do you need to wear safety glasses in the cab of a vehicle? Well, maybe, and people will start saying things like, well, what if he has the driver's window down? Well,
Right.
Okay, now we're in the realm of what if, type situation. Again, that's not where we are.
And I guess that's my point in this conversation is when people need to have their safety glasses on, they need to get their ass chewed or something, do it, right? If their hazard does not exist or it's 0 to little chance of anything occurring, we can play the what if game. And that's an argument that safety uses a lot of times is a what if this, what if this, what if this. And sometimes those are good arguments. Oftentimes it's not, because all it is to kind of get your way. For me, I guess and I don't want to get too crazy with this, but what I'll leave people with is have a realistic approach to what you're doing and understand that are the safety glasses the biggest hazard that you can see in that area that you're in? Or is it something that you're just trying to beat somebody down over? That was kind of always the internal battle with me.
Excuse me, you used a good example. If somebody's in the underground, right, and you've got hanging baskets all over the place and stuff like that, but you see somebody without their safety glasses, you better address those baskets and stuff, because he knows that there's hanging baskets.
Yeah.
So you better notice them, and you better prioritize what you're going to jump on him about, because otherwise he's just going to feel that you're just some chicken shit guy that comes along and likes to talk to hear himself talk.
Well, that's if there's a fire going on, I'm not worried about your safety glasses. And I hate to say that, and I'm not prioritizing anybody's safety. And again, I do get it's the little things, getting those right. But you gotta at some point go, hey, let's figure this big shit out, and then we'll work our way back to the other stuff. And again, that's not to say if somebody's grinding, welding, or they're in an environment where shit can catch it. If you're driving in an open cab or you're in the back of a cattle truck, have the safety glasses on, man. I've seen it where people get crap in their eyes. But again, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't the guy that would go, have your safety glasses on, we're in the cab right now. Take them off, right? To me, there's a realistic approach to some of this stuff, and that's going to be different for everybody. But instead of being that safety cop out there, and to your point, I think that approach has worked for me. Like, hey, and you just point at the safety glasses. Sometimes that's enough, right? And it's just a reminder, and that's all you have to do. But there are other times that I've seen people go like, hey, where are your safety glasses? And then we're in a 15-minute safety glasses conversation, and you got a basket hanging above. Time out, guys. Let's actually talk about something that really matters.
Yeah. Why don't we grab that scaling bar and deal with the most important issue first? Yeah.
But I will mention this because you brought it up, and this wasn't on our list to talk about today. Can MSHA cite you on your own standards?
No.
Why not? Because I've walked into operations, mining groups, and they said, well, MSHA cited us on this standard, and this is our own standard.
Well, that's wrong. Contest it. That's all I can say is, so MSHA inspectors get their authority from the CFR. That's all that they're allowed, to enforce. Well, 30 CFR, the program policy manual, anything that's in the 30 CFR, if it's in black and white, like NFPA, the standard for guy wires, okay, they can enforce that because they've adopted that, so to speak, okay? But anything that we write, they can't enforce because it's going to be different from mine to mine to mine to mine.
Correct.
So they can't just arbitrarily enforce everything, even though I've actually had inspectors try and tell me that, well, this is a story for another day, but so we have our own standards for how we want our miners to behave, and that kind of thing. So when they're doing a certain job, see, standard operating procedures, they can be mine site wide. At the mine I currently work at, I've got very few SOPs. Okay, I tried to get each department to specialize the SOPs for the tasks that they're doing, okay? And I explained to them that it's really not an SOP, it's task training. So we went around and we changed the names of everything from SOPs to task training. So it was a multi-step process. First, I got them to do it, and then I got them to change the name. And now our task training program really rocks, right? And I don't need a bunch of SOPs originating out of the safety office. So, but getting back to the blanket policies, yeah, I've got a few of those. What type of PPE you're going to wear, and
there's going to be some standards for sure.
So, I mean, in the mining world, it's going to be a given. Again, you got insurance companies involved, so you got to have something.
Well, and the reason I brought it up is because what I used to tell people all the time is that they can't cite you on your own standard. But what they can do is tie that back into a regulation or somewhere in the 30 CFR. So let's take this safety glasses incident. It's 15,006, and I know that just because I looked it up prior to coming on here, not because I'm good at memory. But it talks about PPE and your requirements for PPE. the key conversation in there is when a hazard exists, right? And that is where they say, well, according to your policy, they don't have their PPE on. Fair enough, but they can't write that. What they're going to write it under is that 15,006, and there has to be a hazard that existed during the time that they saw it.
That's what I mean by the condition has to exist, or
Correct.
should. Okay, so a situation that's listed in the 30 CFR, before they can write the citation, the hazard has to address that situation.
Right.
Again, that's why I use the example of taking the bag of trash out.
Yeah.
So that doesn't meet their criteria. So they will sometimes try to go to company policy and say, well, it's your policy. You have to wear safety glasses at all times. And I said, so I have to wear safety glasses sitting at my desk? That's different. But, if you go outside, you should have safety glasses on. And where's the hazard?
Right.
You've heard me say that millions of times.
Correct.
So that they can use a company's policies to raise the negligence.
And that makes sense.
Meaning we were aware of the
This
situation
hazard,
that he should have been wearing safety glasses, and it's up to us to enforce that. So he raises negligence for the company on the citation.
Yep. No, I agree. I know, and we got sideways a little bit there, but I know that's been a conversation that I've continually had in my career and said, and they have to write it under something from that little book. And in order for them to do that, they have to find something wrong. So while it might coincide with what you have going on as a standard at site, it has to be something from that little book. They're not going to write you on your standard. Now they will find or increase negligence, or, you know what I mean? But it's got to be from that little book.
So once again, MSHA inspectors and state inspectors, whatever, they're people. Okay. So they'll take what idea or preconceived opinion they have on the situation, and they will try to write a citation or an order, whatever the case may be, on it. But unfortunately, it's up to us to call them on that. So, and if they write the paper, then it's up to us to contest. I don't think this guy was, interpreting the standard correctly. However, you can do it politely, right?
Well, and again, we went to the side on that, but it was a conversation that's always been brought up. And I think the more you have these conversations and the more we educate ourselves, the more we understand how this game actually works and is played. It's by no means to beat these guys up. I'll say that probably every podcast, because that's not the intent. It's just talking about experiences that we've had to maybe help somebody else out there.
Experiences, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on to the next question, which is it's more of a philosophical question. And you and I have probably dove into this a couple times, but I don't remember the conversations. Can all accidents be prevented?
Well, I would say no, because there are always acts of God. Humans just aren't fast enough to dodge God.
Sure.
So there's things, whether it's a bolt of lightning or whatever. And I know people say, well, if there's lightning, you shouldn't be outside and this kind of thing. But we have these systems in place that detect lightning, right? And what if the system is just not picking it up? What if it's behind a mountain where a guy is, or something like that? So I would say no. Are the vast majority of them preventable? Absolutely. And in accident investigations, we go for the root cause, right? We go for the throat. We try to find, okay, what caused this? Was it mechanical error, human error, whatever the case may be? So I think most of those absolutely can be.
Why is it such an unpopular thing for safety people to say that? And the reason I say that is my argument's similar to yours, but I would add that I always said, and keep in mind, when you get into a group of safety people and somebody asks the question, are all accidents preventable? And you say no, you're almost the outlier. At least that's been my experience. And then they'd always go, well, why? And I said, as long as we have the human element, you're always going to have that potential, a higher potential for accidents.
Sure.
Can we put policies and procedures and different things in place? We can. And even when you follow all those policies and procedures, you have something like, lightning strike is what you said.
Earthquake,
yeah.
you name it,
Right.
So,
But even when you follow those policies, they can cripple people's ability to think outside the box, which can put them in harm's way as well. So to me, this is a very philosophical question, and I don't think it should be unpopular to say no. I think that we should always strive to get to that zero, to have that mindset of we need to prevent this accident from happening. But I think that the misconception is that if we admit that, then we're not good safety people. And the reality is are we realistic safety people, in my opinion?
right. Well, a lot of places want safety guys that go around and beat the drum and preach safety. It's safety, 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 safety. It's like the saying "safety first." I hate that. I would like to think thinking is first. One time I had a couple supervisors at the underground come to my office, and they're standing in my doorway and they're looking at their shoes and they're like, "Jim, we screwed up." I really? What'd you do? "Well, we did a job, but we didn't follow policy." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So tell me how you went about the job. "Well, we got together and talked about it." And I said, "Good enough. Get out of my office."
Probably wasn't popular.
And they turned around and I said, "Oh, by the way, did anybody get hurt?" "Well, no, we actually found a better way to do it." "Congratulations. Good job, guys. Thank you." And they were like, "We're not getting written up?" I said, "Absolutely not." But it goes back to why I don't have a lot of SOPs. I will give people the tools to plan ahead, like JHAs, FLRAs, and that kind of stuff. And they're pretty basic. It's just, this is the group that got together. This is what we talked about. This is how we decided we're going to do it. If we changed anything, this is what we changed, and that kind of stuff. It just gives them a chance to, I had my process crew over the weekend used the JHA very successfully. I was impressed.
Well, the JSAs, and so I'm with you. There's a time and place to have robust safety stuff in there. So I do want to note that, because I think that's sometimes we get too policy heavy, too procedure heavy, whatever, that we forget what we're doing. And I think that's probably something I've taken from you out of Mindsight. And this is where the likelihood, how often do you do it, the frequency, or what makes this thing trigger to do a JHA or JSA, whatever the hell you want to call it, versus a field level risk assessment versus a formal risk assessment, right? There's different values in that. But what people should realize is they're all tools for you to use. Some of them are just higher level, but really most things on a Mindsight you've done over and over and over. Maybe that's once a year. And yeah, let's stop and talk about that. Maybe it's once every 5 years, and we should really dive into this because there's people that haven't experienced that. That's what those tools are for. They're not there to limit you on what your job is. And so if you're a safety professional out there, you should absolutely be bringing people that do the work there to have those conversations, because those are the only people that are going to know how to do it, to me, the right way. We're just the buffer to go, hey, is there a better way to do it? And do we need to put that somewhere so that knowledge doesn't get lost either?
Yeah.
I tracked JSAs a lot and FLRAs and things like that, because those were the tools on how to improve, in my opinion, year over year.
Right. And the big difference between them is just who's involved.
Correct.
How big is the project, as to who you're going to bring in. As far as safety guys, if you want a safety guy there, I'll make sure there's a safety person there so that, we can show you how to go through the process if you want, and then you'll know how to do it the next time. But,
well, one of the most rewarding parts for me was when I did teach somebody how to do a JSA, and they went out and said, "Hey, Grover, here's our JSA for this." And they're doing it themselves. They're putting those things in place going, huh. And in those, to your point, I'd say, is there a better way to do this? Is there a more efficient way? Because while we're there to talk about safety, maybe there's a more economic way of doing this. Maybe there's a way to pass down some of this knowledge. And so what my JSAs, that my groups, I should say, a lot of times, not always, but at least in my later career, they would turn into improvement pieces. Hey, we know that we need to do these 10 steps, and those 10 steps are pretty basic, but you get 3 or 4 or 5 suggestions on, hey, can we do it this way next time? Or, hey, we thought about this doing it, or thought about this after we were doing it. That's what you want it to be, is the live document to throw out new ways of doing the same old stuff.
And usually a more efficient way of doing something is the safest way of doing something. Making sure you've got the right machines, all the materials there are on site so you can look at it and not have to make a bunch of trips and all that kind of thing. So, but to get back to the original question real quick, are all accidents preventable? I think the more you educate your workforce, and I think that's what I want my safety group to be, is educators, to go out and show people this is the steps we should take to make sure that we are more efficient, more safe, whatever the case may be. I don't want a bunch of parrots that are going around again saying, "Oh, safety first," or zero harm or whatever. So, and the point about who attends, whether it's a FLRA or a JSA, JHA, whatever you want to call it, you get their perspective. So if you're bringing in a contractor to help you do this task, oh boy. And I'm not saying anything bad about contractors. I love contractors.
Sure.
Okay. But you got to make sure the communication's there, because they're not used to working on our site. They're not used to talking to our people. So communication gets very important. So
yeah, I'm gonna dive in on a couple of those points. One was being out there. You don't want the safety guy out there just like you said. You want him out there educating. I think this is something I learned from you, and I'll throw Larry Nyman out there, is look up a standard. Now go find that standard in the workforce and learn more about that standard. Right? We'll talk about in theory what that means, but you need to go out and see what that looks like in the real world. So I vividly remember something around ladders, I'll say, because I remember looking at ladders in a processing division and having conversation of, oh, does this means this, or how does that mean that, and educating yourself. But you also got to put down your ego and do that with the supervisors. And you guys that are out there that are supervisors, lead men, and are directing the workforce or influencing the workforce, I challenge you guys to do the same thing. Put the ego aside. Go find something, ask questions. If I don't know it, you don't know it, somebody's going to know it. Or question, I don't say in a bad way, but question why it's this way.
Oh, always ask why.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Always ask why. Question authority. Yeah, I'm saying a lot of bad words here, but it's like just because somebody's a manager and they come down from the admin building and they're saying, do this. Better in your mind is the guy that does this kind of stuff all the time. If that sets off the short hairs on the back of your neck, then speak up, say something. And yes, supervisors, superintendents, lead men, those are the backbone of any mine. If anything's going to get done right, they're going to make sure it's done.
Well, I'll say this, as I progressed through my career, I would go out and I would bring a process supervisor or frontline lead person and go out and ask these questions. Now, once I started to understand these questions from a legal perspective, from a practical perspective, then it was like, well, Grover has this information. Well, I don't necessarily, right? So while I can talk to some of these things, that's where your ego needs to be put aside for me as a safety guy as well, to go, maybe these guys and what they're asking can be looked at from a different view, and maybe there's something else here that I can dive into. So as you go on in your career, be willing to be questioned as well, because that's only going to help you grow, the team grow. Maybe you do have the answer. And a lot of times as you've seen enough stuff in your career, you will have an answer. But it's always good to kind of refresh that button and make sure that, oh yeah, that's why this is, and that's a good reminder, and this is a good conversation to have. So, and to wrap that one up, I mean, again, I'm going to say is the human element, in my opinion, is always going to be the caveat to why we can't have an accident-free workforce. It's also the one reason why we will be better than anything else in safety is because of that human element. And so I know very probably unpopular to say as a safety guy or a previous safety guy, but I think it's a realistic approach in my opinion. And I challenge you guys to throw out your comments and feedback too, because we're sitting here just rambling on as two guys with experience, and from our experience, maybe your experience has been different.
Yeah, we're not slamming minors, the average guy out there, but we do have a lot of personalities, a lot of different perceptions, a lot of different attitudes, and as long as we have that, yeah, we're going to have accidents. But I wouldn't have it any other way either, because that's what makes us us.
100%.
We've got the potential to fail. We've got the potential to succeed. So you got to take sometimes the good with the bad.
Well, and I probably should have saved that question for last, because the next one that ties into that is, how do you, as a safety professional, we've been supervisors on the operations side, I should say, how do you fight that complacency after year so you don't have those accidents?
Complacency, again, it's...
And so let me take a step back. I'm going to say complacency, there's fatigue in there. There's the human element, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think fatigue is complacency, because you can have a guy with 20 years experience, but if he's dog tired,
I agree with that.
He can make mistakes. Complacency is another mindset. Like I said, one of the downfalls of being people. So as you feel, whether in your mind or not, your boss might think different, but you think this job inside and out, and I can do this with my eyes closed. And so you try it and you get hurt. Whoops. So complacency, maybe it's an attitude. Why I used that word earlier is I don't really want to do this job. And so you get complacent about doing it. One of the things I always tell people is keep your head on a swivel. Even if you're doing routine work, just make sure you're not in the line of fire, and pay attention to what you're doing, that kind of stuff. So complacency can be a bear, and it'll get people.
Yeah.
And that's usually what happens, whether somebody gets hit by, squeezed between two machines or whatever happens to somebody, it's because they were complacent. They were too close. They don't have, a mindset where they want to take care of their own body.
Sure.
Because if somebody doesn't say, I want to take care of my eyes, because I've only got two.
Right.
And I don't want to be wearing an eye patch over one eye for the rest of my life and stuff like that. So
do you think, and this is because I just thought about this, and I've probably thought about this, but I've never put it together in does complacency equal confidence?
No, I think confidence is something all itself. And I love it when people have confidence in what they're doing. They do a good job. They do a job right, and they insist other people do the job right. That's confidence. Complacency is a lack of caring.
Well, maybe I'm looking at it from a different perspective or a different lens, because I think about the first time you ever do said task. Your eyes are wide, you're looking at stuff, you're ready to learn. It's a lot different than the 1,000th time that you're doing that same task. And to me, there's a portion of confidence in knowing that you've done this before, you can do it before, that you get complacent on that. And why that rings to me is because I had a gentleman in a process division, and he worked X amount of years without a lost time incident. And I was just rapping with him one day, chatting. I said, how do you prevent every day from getting hurt? And I've shared this in a lot of safety meetings, and he said, I treat every day like it's my first. Yeah, do I have more knowledge? Do I know more things? But I treat it like my eyes are wide open, and I'm looking at things that can bite you.
And that's how he's fighting complacency, because I think confidence and complacency are two different things. Okay, confidence in doing a job well means you learned it well, you do it well, other people count on you to do it well, and this kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that the complacency monster can't come stand next to you and put its hand on your shoulder, right?
Well, I think that if you're confident, you have the likelihood to be more complacent than if you aren't.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it goes back to again, attitude,
That's good.
personality,
Yeah.
because yes, complacency can bite anybody. I don't think it's got anything to do with how well you do your job, confidence in how well you do your job. I think it's just something that, like I said, if somebody's assigned to do a job they don't want to do, or they think they're too good for that job, or whatever the case may be, complacency is going to be right there saying, how you doing?
Do you think complacency then is a direct decision? Meaning, so I'm looking at complacency like I can be complacent because I'm fatigued. I can be complacent because I'm overconfident. How I'm listening and hearing you a little bit is that complacency happens almost as a direct result of you wanting to kind of sidestep something.
I don't. No, that was just an example.
Sure.
Complacency could be anything from sitting there watching the football game when your wife just asked you to take the trash out. It's
Or is that selective hearing?
that could be part of it. I don't know, but it's like I said, it's a conscious.
So it is conscious.
I think it's a conscious attitude.
Okay.
I'm a laid back guy. I'll get to it.
Sure.
It's going to happen, but not right now. It's this kind of thing. And the same thing happens on the job. You could be very confident, very competent at your job and that kind of thing. But you're like, well, I know I should move that cord because it's in the walkway, but I'll get to it later. Somebody comes along, trips over the cord. Complacency.
So I think that's where you and I are looking at it from different lenses, because I'm looking at complacency as a conscious thing that you're thinking about. Like, I'm tired at work. I make a mistake because I was fatigued, but that also equals I was complacent, right? So then the conscious decision was, well, why didn't you get sleep? So you go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I stayed up too late talking to my wife or whatever, the kid taking out the trash.
Yeah.
So but it is different because I'm looking at complacency from a non-conscious act, and I can see that there's two roads you can go down here. One of I would say conscious complacency, and non-conscious complacency.
Well, and that's
Struggling with
why
words today.
that's all right. That's why I say it's an attitude, and an attitude's a hard thing to get a rope around, because how do you change somebody's attitude?
Yeah.
Because if you have an attitude where I'm not going to go to bed yet, I'm going to finish again watching this game, and then I'll go to bed, and then you end up with 4 hours sleep.
That complacency takes effect before you get to the job site.
And maybe it's because I know what I'm doing the next day, and I've done it a million times. I'm good at it. So, complacency. But I think they're separate things that they're all part of the same gang, so to speak. And the bad guys.
Well, and I will note that in safety, we like to throw things in definitive buckets. So sometimes you have, was he fatigued or was he complacent? Are they one and the same? And I think that's kind of what we're discussing here too, and maybe another great topic to have.
Yeah, I mean, because that's a good point, because, if you're filling out an accident report, for example, how do you put bad attitude in there? How do you put an attitude susceptible to complacency, allowing fatigue? It's something that really can't go on a written report. So again, when you're looking for the root cause, I can say, well, Derek's just got a bad attitude.
Sure.
And that's why things happen. But
in your career, have you ever seen an attitude be a root cause?
I think the attitude that let the other bad guys in the door has been the root cause of an accident. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So what do you mean by that, if I can ask a little deeper?
Well, if somebody, for example, has been written up a couple times for cords in a walkway, then he's a complacent person, okay, because he's got a bad attitude.
Sure.
No,
that makes sense. And as I'm just kind of wiggling through this, going, all right, what does this look like? How does that? Because complacency, as I sit here and think, it can be a lot more. It can be a couple things, but from what I'm gathering from your perspective is that it's intentional. Whereas complacency, in my opinion, complacency can be unintentional as well.
Yes. I mean, when you say it's intentional, I think complacency can be unconscious just as well as conscious. You know, if somebody's kind of like a shyster type guy that, he's always looking for the easy way, how can I make the most money, whether it, involves other people being hurt or not, it doesn't matter, so that's why it's hard to put your finger on, and that's why at safety meetings and stuff, frequently I'm talking about attitude, especially with supervisors that, you gotta want to protect your people. I always tell them it's your responsibility to make sure that they do this job right, set it up right, execute it properly, and everybody goes home. So I'm trying to change attitudes a lot.
I agree with, so attitude and work ethic, they're the only two things you can't train, right? And you can try to influence that. And I think as people, that's something that we have to know as well. Am I going into the day with a shit attitude? And if I am, how do I pull myself out of that? But there's a trickle down effect, if you will.
And there's another good point, not to interrupt you, but we could go to work with a different attitude almost every day.
Yeah.
If we're grouchy, if the wife was yelling at us or kids were sick or something like that, you're going to go in, or if your team won the night before, you're going to go in with a good attitude, So it's not only a shifting concept to change people's attitudes, it's in itself is always changing.
Yeah.
Because no one person is the same person every day. It's like
that human element.
My guys know not to come in my office Monday morning until I've had my coffee. So my attitude changes from before I had my coffee till after I've had my coffee. I can get a change on my attitude there.
I would agree. So the other thing too is, and I thought about this when you're saying, think about from an individual perspective, you guys out there listening, and I'm going to use sports as an analogy, but you stayed up late to watch the game. Your attitude the next day is going to be a lot different if your team won versus if your team lost, because your attitude is different going into that next day. I stayed up and watched this damn team lose, or I stayed up and they've pulled it out, and you know what? I'm going to get through this shift. Attitude's is a big one, man. And then you throw work ethic behind that, and that's where that's where you generally see those good employees.
Yep.
So, well, with that, Jim, you got anything else before attitude was a great thing to end on. I think, I think that in all of this, good conversations, I want to thank the people out there that brassed in, the people that threw us some ideas. We could go down these rabbit holes again for probably 2 hours. That's not the intent of it. It's kind of get in, get out. If we need to do more of these, let us know if you guys want to hear more of them. But right now we're going to stick for once a month. So, Jim, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Anytime.
Thanks for hanging out with me today.
You're the only one here.
And you guys can check us out at miningmindsllc.com. Keep those brass ends and questions, comments coming, and let us know what you guys want to hear next on The Safe Word.
Trucks rolling, steel boots stomping, engines humming like a prayer in the morning. Dust clouds rising on a cold sunrise, headlamps cutting through Nevada skies. Coffee in the cab, got a long day coming, clock in, crank up, keep them drills humming. Brothers and sisters in the same old fight, chasing that bonus under halogen light. We ain't looking for fame or glory, we're the backbone telling our story. Gravel, hearts in line, sweat and soul and overtime. We're the voice inside the industry, mining minds where the real ones speak. From the pit to the plant to the families waiting, hard work built the world we're making. Hands of iron, hearts of gold, stories of pride that need to be told. Grover and Dane don't keep the truth alive. mental battles and the way folks cope. Ain't no shame in showing that heart. It's what keeps this whole thing started. Boots on gravel, hearts in line, sweat and soul in overtime. We're the voice inside the industry, minding minds where the real ones speak. From the dusk to the dawn, we keep moving strong for the new generation to carry on. Hands of iron, hearts of gold, stories of pride that never get old. Grow and Dino, keep that light in me, mine and mine. The voice inside the industry. Hey, turn that mic up loud, let the miners talk, make their families proud. Hey, from the shaft to the sea, every ton we pull writes history. We're the voice inside the industry, minding minds where the truth runs free. For the ones underground and the ones at home, we keep that heartbeat rockin' stone. Hands of iron, heart